Welcome to the podcast Road to Inclusion from the Atlas Alliance. In this podcast series, we'll cover themes such as disability rights, disability inclusion, the empowerment of persons with disabilities, inclusive international development aid, and disability inclusive humanitarian action. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new and exciting episode of the podcast Road to Inclusion. I'm your host, Gagan Chabra. I'm the project manager for inclusion at the Atlas Alliance. And today we have a very, very exciting guest here with us in the studio, Noora Engdahl. Noora is the head of international programs at Save the Children Norway. Save the Children is one of the largest CSO, civil society organization, mainstream organization working in Norway and internationally. It has been internationally working for almost a century. And we'll have a very, very exciting, insightful, engaging conversation with Noora about the Global Disability Summit, about inclusive education, about her work in Save the Children, and many more things. But before we jump into all those exciting topics, let me describe myself quickly. Today, I'm wearing a black jumper, a black buttoned-up shirt, a black jacket. I have long, curly, dark hair, and a black tinted glasses. And in the studio, the wall is light colored, and we are shooting it on 14th of January, 2022. Noora, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Gagan.
Would you like to describe yourself, Noora, and tell the audience how you look, and then we move to the other questions?
Thank you. You know, you forgot to say that you have 3 beautiful golden rings actually on your hand. I think that should be mentioned. So, Gagan, I'm wearing actually a red sweater. It's a woolen red sweater. And I put on, because I came to the studio, nice big red earrings.
Wow.
And it's because red is my favorite color. And I have black pants, black, winter shoes, kind of blonde, gray, dark hair. Sorry, that sounded, but the most important is I think I'm wearing the red. So I think we are in a nice contrast into this white room. You are dark and I'm the red.
Yeah,
balance.
absolutely. And red is a color of passion. So, and we're going to talk about a lot of passionate work in the domain of inclusive education and the disability sphere. So that's fantastic. Thank you, Noora. We really appreciate the fact that we are kicking off 2022 with you as the first guests. So tell the audience, the listeners, who is Noora Engdahl? Because tell us about your biography a little bit, your work. Yeah, tell us, please.
Thank you. I'm, I always start where I grew up, which is a very small village up in the northwest coast of Norway. Between Molde and Kristiansund, if you've been up to that, sort of south of Trondheim. Very small village. When I grew up, maybe there were like 25, 30 people. Now there's 7, 8 people who live there permanently, among them my mother. So I grew up in that small village. And I think I was always really interested in culture, politics, the war, Second World War was still like the major thing that happened actually to this village. It's called Kvalvåg on the coast. And because during the Second World War, when the Germans were occupying and came to attack Norway in the April days in 1940, they tried to save the gold in the Norges Bank, the central bank. So they had to take the gold and bring it over to England. And as they were transporting the gold, they stopped in this small little village that I grew up. And they hid it up on the farm and, were hiding it from the Germans, covering it with ice and pretending that it was fishing boats. So the gold transport is actually still the main thing that has happened in this little village. So you see how this is a long time ago. So I grew up with that history. A lot about the war, conflict. And I think I was very early on interested in the world actually outside this little village. So that led me to have the opportunity to get an education. Also in Oslo, you studied at the university. Also had the chance to go to London to study Middle East studies. And the other thing about this village also is that people are quite religious, Christian. So I learned a lot about the landscape in the Middle East and Palestine and Israel. So I felt like I knew actually the villages of Nazareth and Bethlehem more than I knew, let's say, cities in Europe. So I very early on became interested in the Middle East. And I started studying Arabic, and so I went to London, studied there, lived in the Middle East, lived in Palestine. So, you can say exposed to international affairs. And then I ended up, I've been in Central, it's a long, long story, but the short one, I think, I had the chance to study. And I think oppression, injustice, just seeing how some people were discriminated against, whether because of, abilities or disabilities, as we'll speak about today, but also in my life, it's been about what you believe in, who you are, gender identities, religion. So I think that's the red thread throughout a lot of my work. And I worked with humanitarian rights-based issues for the last 25 years, I would say.
Wow, that's like a quite an action-packed career, if I may say so. So the thing which fascinated me the most was like from a small village on the west coast in Norway, which is on the northwestern periphery of Europe, a small country. Norway is like 5.3 million people as a country. From there to Israel, to Bethlehem, to Nazareth, to talking about the Middle East. And little birdie says to me that you also speak Arabic.
I do, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's such a blessing to actually get to know a language. It was hard work. I mean, that's one thing to say. And I learned it at an early stage. So I was 18, 19. Had the chance also to live in Syria, in Damascus, with a beautiful Syrian family that was really teaching me everything. And then also had the chance to live in Gaza for 4 years. I was working for Norwegian People's Aid, Norsk Folkehjelp, as a country director. And then when you live 4 years among people, and at that time also I had got married, so I had my kids. My oldest daughter was, she grew up there basically, and went to kindergarten, and when you have children and a family, you become more than just this foreigner, this expat, because you bond with your neighbors, people around you. So that stage, I think, I internalized the language basically. I love Arabic. I could even dream in Arabic actually in the end when we lived there. Now it's been some time ago, but it's a beautiful language. And that opens doors to people's, stories, their families. I'm a very curious person. And also because I started asking about your back when you grew up in India and how that was. And but to me, people is everything. We build relationships, we learn from each other, and so I think also the link growing up in a small village. I don't know, because I think when you grew up in a big village in India.
Or a big city, a city which is having a population which is almost 1.5 times more than the whole population of Norway. It was quite big, metropolis, for sure. But and you're spot on. Like when you said that at the end of the day, we are dealing with flesh and blood human beings, people, individuals who have aspirations, expectations, fears, hopes, desires, dreams. And it's so important to kind of engage with them as human beings.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And I think also when you grow up we all grew up in a smaller, bigger context, right? But for me, growing up in that small village meant that we had all kinds of people in the village, we had, of course, younger, elder people with different disabilities, of course, people with different stories, some traumatized, all kinds. And then, and I think also knowing people who lives around me makes me safe. So I always, so when I move to a place, I always get to know the neighbors. And can I just say, in Arabic, there's this fantastic saying. Yeah. It says, El jar qabla al dar. Jar and dar. Dar, dar, house, right? Jar is neighbor. So it means know your neighbor before the house. So when you pick a house, you look at who's the neighbor, and then you choose the house.
And then perhaps you get a chance to love thy neighbor as yourself as well.
Exactly.
Great. No, that's such a rich and authentic start to this whole discussion which we're going to have now, and a perfect segue because yes, you came from this small village, but yes, the driving factor is the word which you mentioned, curiosity. And I think curious minds, open minds get a chance to, of course, whenever the opportunity arises, engage with the broader world and understand the globe and how individuals are in different contexts in Syria, in Israel, in Lebanon, in Africa, and other parts of the globe. So if I may take you back now to your professional experience, Save the Children, head of international programs, director of international program. What kind of activities does Save the Children engage in, which directly resonates with, say, children, young people, adolescents with disabilities?
In Save the Children, we do basically three things. We try and do our best so that children will survive, learn, and be safe. And so from the early ages, working on health and nutrition, making sure that children have the best start in life, and that could be working with young girls who might have been pregnant at an early age, or securing their safe delivery, but also from that to education and learning. And that's actually at the heart of what Save the Children do. Our education programs, making sure that kids also get into school. And when they come into school, that they learn. That is actually, there's a quality education, but also getting them into school. And this is particularly important now after the pandemic, where there's millions of children out of school. So getting them back into school. And many of those outside school are children with disabilities. And the third area, as I said, around protection. So survive, learn, and be safe, and be protected. And protecting children against abuse, violence, can be relational violence, in families, but also at the schools, but also violence related to war and conflict. So, and protecting children from, that are in a crisis situation. So those three things is actually what Save the Children has been doing for more than 100 years. You said almost a century. We were established in 1919, right after the First World War.
That's right.
And the children that we worked mostly with also in the beginning, it was the children of the enemies.
Yeah.
It was actually established to bring support and help to children who were dying in Germany, that had lost the First World War, and these were the children, of the enemy. So so it's around a lot on the. So of course, getting children to survive, learn, and be safe, but within there also, we don't just say all children, right? We look at the context that kids are living in. And there's always some children that are excluded, huh?
Yes, absolutely. There's some children who are less privileged than those who are the other children. Yeah, and I would like you to linger on the second aspect. You said beautifully, survival, learning, protection. The second aspect, learning, because that is linked to education. And the reason why I want you to linger on that is because there's this amazing proverb which says, that you gave a child a fish and you fed the child for a day. Teach a child how to fish, and the child is good. It can feed itself. He or she can feed itself, herself or himself. So, in this case, what kind of activities does Save the Children do? Specifically targeting children, young adolescents, young people with disabilities. You want to linger on that a little bit?
Absolutely. What we do, first of all, when if we enter into areas where we don't have specific expertise ourselves, and when we started engaging much more and more within the whole disability area, this is around 10 years ago, at least for Redd Barna, Norway, we partner. We find partners that have a specific both understanding, knowledge, and competence on the area. So when we said, we need to address and understand the barriers to why children with disabilities are out of school or why they're not learning when they are in school. So we established partnerships, and amongst them, very prominently here in Norway, of course, the partnership we have with Atlas Alliance and organizations of people with disabilities themselves, OPDs. So having partnerships, and addressing the barriers together, learning from them. What are the barriers and how can we adapt to them? So there's not like one blueprint, on how to do that, right? But let's just say, give an example from Nepal. We've been working with trying to get children with disabilities into the schools and have them learn. We realized, of course, very quickly there's so many levels you need to work on. The stigma and a lot on the attitudes in the communities, shame, mothers who feel so shameful because they gave birth to a child with a disability, feeling it's their fault, right? So working on the whole community conversations, why do we look at it like this? Where does this come from? Addressing, talking. So community conversations became like one important part to even start addressing the issues of why we are not allowing children and youth with disabilities to learn, to get into the school. Then the second level around the whole education system, from the curriculum to training of teachers, how can they actually both have the skill set, but also, again, attitudes. To my mind, Gagan, the critical thing around when we talk about disability, it's people, and breaking down stigmas, discrimination, attitudes. I don't have to tell you, and you're living this every day, Gagan. So, but so a lot on the hearts and the minds also of people to make sure that we are addressing. So, but of course, working with teachers, education system, curriculum, resourcing, assistive devices. So I can go on, but I think the main thing all around it is the partnership that we have. In order to both build capacity, build competence, you need to partner with those who wear the shoe on, as we say. And then maybe the final level I will mention what we do in education. So a lot on the programming in schools itself, but also on policy. We've seen the need to systematically address all the barriers that exclude children and young people to get a proper education. It's around policy. So you have to address laws, systematic reviews, where are the barriers in the legal system, policy level, then get policies and laws in place, then start implementing them, then you monitor, and then you go back and having all of those factors together in the end does bring about change. I think we've done some good headways. But again, partnering with people with disabilities organizations themselves, OPDs, but also, if I can mention, this is one of my biggest maybe commitments, having children and youth themselves participate. I think we need a participatory revolution, Gagan, with young people themselves having a say, being listened to. That we need to listen to these guys themselves. Let them take part and define how they want to both learn to be safe, to be protected. So participation also, it's a huge one for me. Yeah.
No, you've given such good food for thought, and you're hitting the nail on its head when you talk about the barriers and the interlocking of those barriers. Like one side, there are these attitudinal barriers, shame, stigma, stereotyping, cultural baggage, which is associated with disabilities. And often children with disabilities or young people with disabilities encounter that because they are immersed in a society which kind of devalues them. Individuals who are afraid, who are not comfortable with the idea of children or young people with disabilities participating in the broader society. But also what you mentioned, which was very interesting, is that how we need to have policies, laws, regulations, which are inclusive to ensure that barriers such as attitudinal barriers, inaccessibility of infrastructure could be removed. Exactly. And it's not done out of a charity or philanthropy or the goodness of an individual, but more at a systemic level. So everything kind of gets grounded in, say, for instance, the Convention on the Rights of the Child or the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And it becomes a human rights conversation.
And operationalizing the CRC, the Child Rights Convention, CRPD, the Convention of People, or the Rights of People with Disabilities, and socializing those conventions. To me, also, people need to know their rights so they can claim them. And for children and youth, I think that's one of the most powerful tools that I've seen. When children and youth know that they have a right, okay, maybe it's hard to achieve it when you live in a poor village in, let's say, Malawi or Palestine, for that sake. But the fact, when you know that you have your right, it's easier to attain it, because you know that there's a protection somewhere, around it. That let's say so strongly again believe that children need to know their rights, internalize it, and start asking it, starting claiming it. So we can, the dream is to have this bottom-up movement, right, of young people who say, listen, I have a right to continue my education. I need to claim that and get out on the streets. And because there's enough money, in the world. It's just that it's not prioritized, because we don't really listen and let children and youth get their rights. So domesticizing also these conventions, putting them into local language, talking about them in radios, talking about them in shows, schools, that's
a podcast.
Systematic. Within Save the Children also, we have a program called Child Rights Governance, and that's exactly around that. Getting all these rights into practice, so kids know them, and they make shows about them, theater plays. And that's the best way of really learning and bringing social awareness and knowledge to your communities. I have to say something, because this issue about exclusion and barriers, as you said, the attitudinal, the cultural ones. When I visit schools, I often, I talk with the principals, and you have a chance to get to know schools. And I would often ask, so, are all the children in this village in school? And I remember very much one time, I think this was in Iraq, actually, and the principal said to me, yeah, sure, everybody's in school. So I said, are you sure? Actually, everybody, because that's quite rare to have all children in the village in the school. Yeah. And then she said, yeah, no, you're right. There's the daughter of the secretary. She's actually not in school. So why is that? No, she, I don't know. She was like, she didn't want to answer what was wrong with that. And then I went to talk to the secretary, and it turned out that this girl had Down syndrome, so she was left at home, did not have any chance to learn, and the secretary actually asked to bring this child up and to bring her in and have support for her. But the principal didn't know how to do it, and didn't feel empowered that she could take that choice herself. So we had this long conversation around it. And then I know that in the end, our colleagues in Save the Children nationally, they reported back that, we managed to get that young girl into the school. Yeah. So sometimes it's those conversations, just asking, are all children included?
Absolutely. And it's so important to kind of go beyond this idea of what is the quote-unquote typical normal children or a typical normal youth. And the children and youth with disabilities, they are not seen as those individuals who belong in the schooling system. As you give the example of those children or young people with Down syndrome, those with cognitive impairments, those with learning difficulties, those who are on wheelchairs, blind, and the rest, sensorial impairment groups. Because the idea is this, that, you don't belong here.
Exactly.
Perhaps you should be at home, or you should be going to a separate special school, not here. This is a quote-unquote regular school.
Exactly. But that's why I was thinking we need to put names. We need to ask, actually, are there any children with disabilities in this community? Are there any with learning impairments? Are there any in a wheelchair? We need to actually ask, because also if you ask too general questions, as you said, people don't think about them, that they belong in school. So they would say, no, everybody's in school. So it's... and I think that's also the thing when we talk about protection and children being protected from violence, from abuse. Also creating safe places so that children dare to alert, creating safe places, and actually also asking, are you feeling safe? Do you have a safe person that you can go to and talk to? Because we know also, again, protection and abuse is unfortunately much more prevalent among children with disabilities, girls. So again, we need to just have this lens that don't think that, as you said, you need to actually put the name, you need to conceptualize, you need to say, ask also specific questions. That's in identifying, right, issues and challenges, and then also when you would design the solutions, they need to be targeted, need to be budgets, resources, to actually move some stones around. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Put your money where the mouth is.
Yeah.
Not just talk about it. And this is a perfect segue. For instance, in 2018, there was the first Global Disability Summit, and one of the core commitments was on inclusive education.
It's true.
Governments, donors, multilateral organizations, countries saying we want to create inclusive education systems where children and young people with disabilities could participate in a safe environment, in an inclusive way, and can learn, because every child from birth has a right to learn. 17 governments committed to it back in 2018. And now we're talking about the Global Disability Summit 2022. And for Atlas organizations, for Save the Children, for the Global Disability Summit 2022, which is going to happen from 14th to 17th of February this year, inclusive education is still a burning issue.
Absolutely.
So what do you think are your expectations from or aspirations for the Global Disability Summit?
I have high aspirations, and for the summit itself, but also actually within our own movement. I'm within the Save the Children family. Last time around in 2018, we also weren't really prepared enough. So when we came to London to the GDS summit at that point, in our family, it was Save the Children UK and Save the Children Nepal. They committed specific commitments.
Got it. Yeah.
Save the Children Norway, and globally, we weren't. We were just a bit unprepared, I think. But this time it's different. We are advocating and really mobilizing and trying to bring our whole movement on board with specific commitments that can be tracked, and we need to be held accountable also for delivering on these commitments. So. And making quite a number of commitments. I hope we're still also, bringing this and having these conversations inside our movement. But around education, as you say, very specific again, because there's a huge lift that needs to be in education. I don't think I can stress how important it is to step up education now, because there's so many children who have been outside with the pandemic. I don't know if you saw the news from Uganda the other day. Finally, almost 2 years, finally children in Uganda are getting back to school. We've been working a lot on the home learning and learning kits and in communities, but of course it will never replace the school. But so the huge step up that we need to have for education. But also we're committing on protection, as I talked about, like really to work on protecting children, particularly girls, from violence, exploitation, abuse, and again using disability inclusive child protection interventions, including gender-based violence. So that's a big commitment from our side that we're hoping to get in. We're also committing to, if I can again talk about the representation, and actually to promote, the participation and bringing support, so strengthening, supporting leadership and leadership development, role of youth, women, ethnic minorities, indigenous, intersectionality, so actually to bring actually a whole level of new leaders, young people who can get access and be part of, leading the disability movement among young people. And I mentioned the partnerships with social movements. We're also committing to capacity on inclusive education, in the education work for, yes, I have a whole list, but, I'm not going to take you maybe through all of it, but I think the most important part for me is really the children and youth participation, because I'm, I think we're not going to achieve actually anything unless we get children and youth to take part themselves. And define their own, realities, define the challenges that they're living, the barriers. They know the barriers themselves much better. And they have to be part of defining. We have to listen to them, support them in finding solutions, concrete recommendations. Yeah, no, I'm just. I think that's the big change, the step change that we have to have. But so within our family, Cederström family, a lot of commitments, and maybe this is the big ask. Other organizations like us, civil society organizations, it's our time now to step up. And you guys, I'm saying, you guys as an OPDs, Atlas Alliance being a fantastic example of really a movement of people with disabilities themselves. You've been in the forefront, also alone, I think, too long. What's our responsibility? What are we doing? The rest of us. Why aren't we really stepping up when we talk about rights? But why are there exceptions for you guys? Okay, we fight for human rights, but sometimes people with disabilities, no, we put you in a corner. You're like a special case. We're never going to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals unless really we have the full inclusion of people with disabilities. So I think challenging, holding us to account, but seriously also challenge us, the mainstream organizations. You guys need to step up.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's a gear change here.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Like I really liked your reflexive, critical approach. And when you ask the questions, what are the mainstream organizations doing to support the disability movement? Because for far too long, disability inclusion has been a prerogative of persons with disabilities and the organizations of persons with disabilities.
That's true.
But we are talking about building up grassroots mobilization. We are talking about building up broad social coalitions which are intersectional, which appreciate diversity as a good in itself. And from that point of view, I really appreciate the fact that you, Save the Children, are now saying that, okay, in 2018, we were not that prepared, but now we are getting prepared because inclusive education matters. And you are spot on when you're talking about representation. There are two things which comes to my mind of representation for young people with disabilities. Number one, the core foundational principle, nothing about us without us. Exactly. So you engage with children and young people with disabilities as they are the ones who are living the conditions, the barriers, encountering them and overcoming them. And they are the ones who are going to shape the future of the society where we live in. And the second thing, which is very important, is, which back in the day, Mahatma Gandhi once said, that be the change you want to see in the world, right? One thing is to just sit back and wait for things to happen. Another thing is to say, okay, fine, I'm going to make a small effort to make the change take place. And you are the change maker in Save the Children.
Well, we're trying to walk the talk, basically just do what we, but we've tried. We're not completely there either yet, but I'm happy to say that for within the Save the Children family, disability rights, it's kind of like a very natural part of everything we do now. We've just approved our 22 to 24 strategy, if I can just give you, so of course, as I said, the education protection, but we've also included a new part about protecting children from the effects of climate change and environmental destruction, and supporting children and youth's own fight against climate change, the children and youth movements. So in all the thematic areas, themes above that is non-discrimination and working with disabilities. So it's sort of integrated. We're typically working on this twin track and actually triple 3 track also. So both, mainstreaming it into all of the thematic areas that we do, health protection, etc., but also targeting particular areas where we see that we need an uplift. So for example, within data, statistics, we know that still there's a huge need to change the way we measure disability, It's not binary, are you disabled, yes, no. No, it's about, right? And this again. But again, for mainstream organizations, we often don't have the knowledge and the expertise, and again, the attitudes to see how much power there is in statistics, So within the Save the Children movement, I'm really happy to say that we've been working a lot in learning the Washington Group questions, and that's changed about mindset. So, our colleagues in Somalia, when they go around now collecting data, they use the Washington questions. And that's a completely different story, isn't it? Can you put on your jacket without help, or can you brush your teeth? What can you do? So looking at the functionality, what you can function, and just that's that's really been a big change actually in the minds and attitudes and of our colleagues working in the Save the Children family, how we collect data, and then collecting also data on what measures, right? We say really measure what you treasure, and we treasure the how should I say the qualitative data also related to disability. So within Save the Children, maybe I sort of, but my point is we've started. I think we're quite mature now in the sense that we also see OPDs coming to us and would like to collaborate. To me, that's that's what really makes me happy when I know, but really when they see that, we can learn something from you. OPDs come to us and say, can you teach about child safeguarding? Tell us how to keep children safe in our programs. And then we said, we'd love to, because child safeguarding is something we do really well. But also come to us and share how you do the participatory revolution. How do you actually how do you work on participation? Yes, it needs to be safe, it needs to be with informed consent, it needs to be voluntary. And so also, we can learn from each other. And you guys, so there's some way, but we need to walk the talk as mainstream organizations. And I think you guys continue to challenge us.
Absolutely. I think like the two strands which are really crucial, which you're mentioning, one is peer-to-peer learning, that no organization, no individual has the panacea to solve the question of inclusive education. And along with that, the important thing is that we, of course, learn from each other, but at the same time, we have a dialogue which is open-minded. We appreciate curiosity and we treasure it. Because if you're not curious, then you're self-satisfied as an organization that we don't have anything to learn from Atlas. Atlas is working with disabled people or children with disabilities. What has that to do with us? No, there are overlaps. There are points of intersections, points of convergences, which are so important to kind of stress. And that's why in the Global Disability Summit context, there's this one day which is very, very crucial for all of us. It's 14th of February. It's called as the Global Disability Summit for Young People with Disabilities. Yes. And when I hear that, I'm thinking about 200 million young people with disabilities in the Global South, often not getting the chance to get into education, often girls with disabilities, high prone to sexual abuse, violence, gender-based discrimination. So my question is this, that in the Save the Children orbit, how do you envisage that you support the Global Disability Summit Youth Day?
Let me just start by saying I'm so thrilled that we have a Youth Disability Summit. We didn't have that last time around. Yes. We're making headways, finally. So let's just say that this is a fantastic start. And so that's really number one. And then number two, how can those of us around support, facilitate? And I'm really stressing that us as sort of mainstream organizations, Save the Children, UNICEF, others that are working with children and youth, I see our role as facilitators. So the children and youth can actually define the agenda themselves, setting the issues, priorities, and policy recommendations for decision makers like the UN, governments, but also us. So it's not about, we should not lead this. We should step back, as big organizations. Back off, and this all experience and working with child participation, child clubs in so many years in Save the Children is, if you think that you as an adult can lead, this, or like go and intervene too much, you're messing up. Back off. So my message is to us, back off, facilitate, offer arenas, give them platforms, give them resources so that they can meet up, talk freely, without interference of, old people like myself and others, and then really, but take them seriously. Listen to what they come up with, policy recommendations, and support that. Bring that up. That's our duty. For people talk about, youth are the future. No, they are the present. Young people are here now. We should listen to them as they are today, because they are living that experience of, as you said, being out of school, being prone to being abused, violated, and not listened to and learned. I was thinking something when I was walking up here, Gagan. Why are me and you in this studio talking together? What is it? No, but seriously, what do you think we have in common?
I think that we have the color which you're wearing, red, passion towards the issue of disability inclusion, which we want to disseminate across. We want to create a momentum together and build bridges across mainstream organizations like yours, Save the Children, and across disability organizations like ours, the Atlas. Because united we are, stronger we are, together. And we could bring about much more inclusive change together.
I agree. But I also think why you and me are here, as why is Noora sitting here and Gagan, I think it's because somebody listened to us when we were young people. I don't know, I'm testing it out here, but I think that I was listened to, somebody listened to me. I know my mother did, for sure.
Yes, definitely.
Somebody saw us, they saw this young guy. God, he has a potential. We need to listen to him. And they gave you an education, at least from me. Somebody saw me, listened to me when I was young, gave me an arena, a platform. And this is my point, that the Youth Summit, we need to listen to them. And I know that there's a lot of discussion whether we need a separate youth charter. I think we should. I know there's a lot of discussions around that, but I think young people need to form their own, as I said, agenda, their own issues, their own recommendations. Let them come with their issues. Let us not interfere, but just facilitate. That's our role.
No, absolutely. You're spot on with your analysis that often young people with disabilities are not seen as young people who are, quote unquote, the change makers of the society, quote unquote, the captains of their own ships, but more seen as people with disabilities who are dependent, who are weak, who are asexual, who are childlike, and let us be paternalistic around them.
Exactly.
So what you are saying is so empowering in the sense that support them, facilitate them, listen to them, learn from them, engage with them, and make their voices shine or make their perspectives come to light, because they are the ones who will be determining where they want to go. And the classic example from the broader climate arena is Greta Thunberg. There she was, changed the whole dynamic of the climate change movement.
Exactly. Imagine if some adults, can I just to also make this very concrete? The first time I really had one of those big breakthrough understandings of what this means was we were doing a report from Sri Lanka, and it's a series of reports that we call Hear It From the Children. We've done it in almost all over the world now, and if I have a lot, I love these Hear It From the Children reports. Very strict methodology in actually facilitating that children and young people's voices themselves are brought up unfiltered, unedited,
authentic voices.
Exactly. So not with, and the issue here was, so this was from Sri Lanka. What were the key issues that young people were suffering from in Sri Lanka? And, with my adults, I had some certain ideas that I expected to come. What was the first thing that they came up with, these children in Sri Lanka? Just take a guess. What do you think are the main challenges for many, many children in Sri Lanka?
We want to be heard. There's no space for us to be heard.
Yeah, that was on further, but the number one, what do you think it was?
Education. We don't get a chance to go to schools.
I think that was number 2 or 3.
I'm going closer. I'm climbing the ladder.
No, but it's interesting, you see, because none of us would have come up with it.
I feel ashamed to be a child or a young person with disability because society has told me that you are, quote unquote, worthless.
I think that was number 4 or 5. Yeah.
Go right now.
No, but see, this is the thing, because we couldn't think about it. You know what they said? That these kids, they said, please don't allow our parents to go and work outside Sri Lanka. I miss my mother. I miss my father. They're not here. They're outside working in Asia, in Europe, as housemaids, as workers, in Qatar, foreign workers.
Yes. Oh, that sums it all. That talks about the global north-south inequalities, that how we take for granted in Norway maternity leaves, paternity leaves, and all the amazing social protection, welfare benefits, services which we could lean on to raise a good family, to be close to our children.
A huge part of the children and young people in Sri Lanka are living without their parents.
Absolutely.
Their parents are foreign workers.
Yeah.
You see, this is the thing. And that's the first thing, Gagan, that I was like, wow, we have to listen to children. They know so much better what their issues are.
Absolutely.
So and that, because I couldn't even think, I had not come up with that aspect, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't live the realities, none of us. So that was for me a big breakthrough on that, Hear It From the Children report from Sri Lanka. And after that, we've been doing it systematically.
Great. No, you're spot on, and I think, Noora, we could talk about this and many more issues till the cows come home. But from a global disability summit standpoint, or a global disability summit for the youth standpoint, if there is a piece of advice which you would want to give to the Atlas organizations, individuals who are involved in preparing for the summit and who want the summit to be a huge success next month, what advice would that be?
Oh, I think you're doing a lot of great stuff already, Wawan. Sorry, Gagan. I have a good colleague with that other name. A piece of advice. I think as I said, the main thing now is to get mainstream organizations on board. It's us who need to change the gear now, to step up.
And if I may just interject, how do we ensure that these mainstream organizations like your Save the Children, the International Red Cross, and all the big ones say that disability is part of our responsibility?
Yeah.
And Global Disability Summit is a summit where we should be there.
Exactly.
How do we make that happen? Noora?
I think here maybe three things. First thing, language. Please use a simpler language. So many of us we have this horrible tribal language within the sector. So it makes it so difficult. So simple language and simple then messaging. And related, and maybe, so that's the first one. Use that simple language to touch the hearts and minds. It's about people. It's about us. Second one, it's about accountability. We have signed up to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. We've signed up to Leave No One Behind agenda. We have to be held accountable to deliver on that. We will never reach the SDGs without really taking people with disabilities on board 100%. It's never going to be reached. So I think that accountability part is the second part. Second one. I think the third one is really, how should I put that? It's really about maybe it's linked also a bit to accountability, but for our donors, in this case, NORAD, Minister of Foreign Affairs, but also donors in Norway need to operationalize the commitments to the SDGs and put demands. Yes. We need to make sure that we partner with OPDs, for example. We need to document that we are actually collecting meaningful, non-stigmatizing data. So I guess accountability. So hearts and minds, and then accountabilities, but with two legs, both SDGs and in this case, Norwegian donors.
Oh, you're spot on when you talk about, for instance, language and messaging and shaping the narrative and going beyond, for instance, like, of course, just a tragic victim narrative or an inspiring hero narrative, but more towards a more humane narrative, a narrative which says disability is part of human condition. Anybody could become disabled. And if we want to create an inclusive society wherein we would want to live, if by any chance we become disabled out of aging, war, conflicts, injuries, bad genetic endowment, then we better start working towards that society. And Leave No One Behind will only be realized if we do that together. Because, as I said, united we are the greater opportunities we could reach and seize and attain. So That's
And true
fantastic.
participation in the
True
sense.
participation.
Can I also just really flag one thing about the Youth Disability Summit and young people getting on board?
Yeah.
We have to be also on the young people's arenas.
Mm.
You know, their platforms, the social medias. I love the Instagram account of the Youth Summit, Youth Disability Summit.
You're going to my blurb section already.
Oh,
like
okay, okay.
I was going to pitch that in the end. But I'm going to go for
okay.
it.
No, but then you can do that also. But also be on the young people's arenas TikTok.
Yes.
Are we on those platforms?
Yes.
I'm not. I have to admit, but you know, we just have to use to have those young people, the ambassadors, you know, because they own this this issue and it's theirs, and we as others should do everything we can do to facilitate that.
Absolutely, like the issue of inclusive education, safer schools, the issue of ensuring that that every child gets a right to learn and to participate in the society, to get the jobs when they get into employment, when they become young adults. All of that are their issues. Yeah, absolutely, and we should and we've got to make sure that that happens. Definitely. A quick question for you. Well, you told me about the farming. You told me about the fact that you lived in this small village with 25 people. What's it like to be on a weekend with Noora Engdahl? What do you like to do over the weekends?
First of all, I'm really lazy in the morning. I love my coffee in bed and with all the newspapers and all of that. Really lazy. But then I have this. I live out in Ås. That's a university town outside Oslo, with a beautiful farming land area. So I call it gardening, but actually my friend the other day said, Noora, you're not gardening because you're not having roses, you know, and beautiful flowers. Your garden is a farm. So,
back to the basics.
So I have this nice little hothouse or drivhus, what do you call it? Greenhouse, the plastic house, you know, where I grow tomatoes and cucumbers and outside potatoes and carrots. And this year I was trying jordskock. You know jordskock? I think it's called Jerusalem artichoke.
Yeah, Jerusalem. Yeah, absolutely. Wow.
So that's what I love to do. So I get my hands really dirty. You know, there's no long nails here. Thank God you can't see them.
So you're preparing for the apocalypse with the farming.
It's true. Oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah, self-sustained.
But one thing which I should say to you is, which is in common between you and I, and the reason why we are here together is what you said in the end, the laziness, perhaps. Over the weekends, that's something in common, of course.
I love that.
And I would, and the story about the gold, perhaps that reminds me of the gold rings. I should be visiting your village someday.
You should. You should.
Absolutely.
And I'll show you, because you know who came along with the gold transport? It was Nordahl Grieg. He's a very famous. He was a Norwegian. Poet. He's the one who's written to the youth, Til ungdommen.
Yeah.
And he was part of that golden transport, and he slept under this beautiful big tree up in the farmhouse. So it's very powerful. So the gold, the farming. Absolutely. Somebody saw us, right, Gagans? We had education. Yeah, a lot in common.
And on the beautiful note about youth and the poetry for the youth, please, everybody, if you get a chance, go to the Global Disability Summit website, follow those pages online, on Facebook. There's a fantastic page on Global Disability Summit Youth section, wherein you could check out the inspiring, engaged, authentic voices of youth with disabilities from down south, Global South, and also engage with us at the Atlas Alliance, engage with Save the Children, and 14th to 17th February will be the Global Disability Summit. And I hope that individuals with or without disabilities, organizations which are mainstream, those which are for persons with disabilities, get a chance to engage with this issue, because disability is an important issue. It's part of human condition. It is a universal experience. So go and participate in the Global Disability Summit. And Noora, once again, extremely thankful. We are quite elated that you started us in 2022 on this beautiful, empowering, engaged note from Save the Children. Really appreciate your input. Thank you for your time. Thanks,
Thank
Noura.
you, Gagan. I appreciate
Yeah,
it. Thank
yeah.
you so
Thank
much.
you so much. Yes.
Thank you, and have a fantastic GDS together.
Yes. We are stronger together.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this podcast episode. I hope you found this conversation engaging, enlightening, and a little bit entertaining. And if yes, then I hope you get a chance to follow the other episodes as well. And please subscribe and share the podcast series Road to Inclusion.